believe it's a single round robin the entire way through, but that does mean that you get to play just about everybody in your region before you move on to playoffs, and you generally have a pretty strict pecking order when that tends to happen, right? When you just play everybody a bunch of times, you have a pretty good idea of how strong all of our players are. But I am looking a little bit at Mercury Atlas,
Hmm.
and I am noting that a lot of people that they've played against have been people that we've seen on this broadcast before, right? Aether Frost, I remember that name, but I don't remember the actual player behind it.
I wish I had more results or more information for you on that one. I don't. I also remember that name. We could dig out last week's notes, the previous notes as well for that. But sort of the names are starting to kind of come together, mean a little bit more to us, and you can kind of sort of predict based on who's played who, even if they
Yep.
haven't played each other. It's of course not a super easy comparison, but I think the ratings online are starting to sort of even out a little bit just because they've played more games. The sample size
Yeah.
is continuing to go up, so it becomes just a little bit easier to predict, as it looks like we are onto the 64 squares.
And there we are. This is looking fairly principled thus far. It is worth noting, and Carl's very aware of this, I'm definitely a big D4 player. This is my main response to D4 as well. The Horwitz defense generally looking to play something like a Nimzo Indian after
Okay.
these kind of moves. But going for it, again, this is actually really good. This is almost exactly the openings that I go for, right? Just getting this pawn, breaking up your opponent's center by throwing out the C pawn, very much in the style of a Sicilian. Really like this opening so far coming out from Total Math Wiz.
Yeah, so far we are playing a real opening, which is always the first step to everything. I think. As the queen comes out to check, you're going to have to retreat the knight to block, I believe. Um, oh, you can defend
That
the
does
knight with
work.
the pawn. That's smart. Hadn't thought of that. Um, so no single move blunders thus far. It looks like we are on pace for at least a real game.
Yeah, this is good. I like this opening. The one thing, I feel like this second knight move is a little bit superfluous, but other than that, looks okay. And uh-oh, walking directly into a pawn fork here, you will have to trade off one of the pieces.
Yeah, that was a novelty in the position, knight to a6, which previously had been reached about 6 times. I pulled up the database on the second
Nice.
screen, but immediately a +5 advantage for the computer here. Very, very strong.
So we are rapidly approaching a position where White has the advantage again, but the position is a little bit unpleasant. You're going to be seeing a lot of trades coming on rather quickly. The one thing that I am worried about is after takes, bishop blocks, as kind of my expectation, this knight is a little bit likely to hang. I'm actually curious there. I
Ooh,
think that the computer probably wanted to take the bishop with the knight first to avoid those situations.
yeah, that apparently was a blunder. Computer very upset. Bishop takes is just crushing
Yeah.
on the spot.
The big idea here, again, being that after takes, something like blocks or even moves, you should end up a piece as black here at the end, which is why I think you need to trade off the knight in order to make that move work, because again, at the end of it, you still had this, but again, going back the other direction by taking with the queen, suddenly the bishop is not something you can trade off, and you can't pick up the knight either.
Indeed. The little details, what piece you take with the move order of things can matter so much, right?
Yep.
As White looks like will be able to hold on to their extra piece. Michael, a little bit lucky maybe to get out of this one unscathed.
Yeah. The only move that seems like it might work might be queen a3. Everything else will hang the bishop to the knight
But
afterwards.
the queen's trapped also.
Oh,
Well,
well, could have gone this way if you wanted to, but
the
it's
queen was
definitely
very close to being trapped,
yeah,
I guess
very
this
close
way.
to being trapped.
But instead the queen is gone.
And with that, what was looking like a strong opening coming out from Ireland is kind of crumbling in this game, right? It was a pretty strong opening that had strong winning chances, but again, unfortunately, just missing a couple of tactics. And while this does defend the bishop, I think you just take it anyway.
I agree. I think just taking you're up a ton of material. You just want to trade off the pieces as quickly as you can. We've talked about that a lot throughout the course of this season. Just simplify the position. It's a lot harder to make mistakes when there's a couple pieces on the board compared to, most of the pieces on the board. You can't hang mate. It's a lot harder to hang a piece. And instead, moving the bishop back, a very, very passive move, but certainly still good enough to keep the advantage.
Yep. I'm actually curious what the computer wants here, because I think you have to move the king to not lose material. It's not the worst thing to lose material, but, you know, if you can avoid it, it's obviously preferable.
Indeed. Losing material, generally not good.
Generally bad.
I think that one's fair to say. Since you're curious, the king F1 or king E2 were the computer's preferred moves.
Yeah.
Stepping king up. I actually like that, being a little bit more active.
Yep. You know, you can get the rook out easier that way.
Yeah, I agree.
But with such a dominating advantage coming out from, you know, the blunder of the queen, suddenly we are seeing that Michael should be able to make almost any move and have success with it, right? You know, you cannot find a checkmate realistically with only a bishop and a knight, especially when your opponent has so much material. And even with the king a little bit exposed, it's going to take a while for this bishop to get involved.
Yeah, right. It's just the pieces aren't quite strong enough. I think something like queen d4 right now, just sort of forking the knight and the bishop, clamping down the position a little bit more. Probably wise. Instead, moves the queen a little bit to the side, essentially forcing the bishop to retreat, which will, in effect, do the same thing, clear up all the pressure on white's position.
Mm. Actually, not even the worst thing, you know, for Michael to start throwing out, you know, just trading pieces for pawns isn't even the worst thing,
Yep.
right? That's how strong this position is. Plus 16. Of course, you know, getting knight out, getting rook into the mix will also have a lot of success, but now this does blunder this pawn with a fork.
Yes, indeed it does. We will see what the move ends up being. Apparently taking is not good, actually.
Oh, taking on b6?
Yeah, well, okay, it's only plus 12 instead of plus 14.
Only plus
It's
12.
not among the computer's top choices, but pushing the pawn. I like this. I think it's a good practical approach, right? It doesn't. You
Yeah.
don't need to play the most precise moves here at all. Just get rid of the knight, move it over, start trading off a couple of these pieces, because if the knight and or the bishop fall off the board, suddenly there's literally no threat to the white king, and you can begin to consolidate much more easily.
Yeah. This is a very tall-esque move. Unfortunately, it doesn't work because after you take the bishop, the knight is still hanging.
Yep.
But
it does look to add a little confusion.
I do like the idea. I always thought it was very funny watching different ideas of like, well, you can only take one piece on your turn. So if I hang 4 pieces, you can only
Right.
take one of them, and one of them is going to attack you.
Exactly. You don't know which one. Could be anything.
All right, okay. Is it this or this? I actually think that queen c4 might be the preferred move. I guess it doesn't matter. I guess not. I
The
was
knight is
wrong.
gone. Yep. Well, it might have been the better move, but it was not the move that was done.
True.
You actually can castle in this position still for black. Sort of never too late to castle. Never forget. You can always still castle. It's not necessarily good, but
Yeah.
But it's a cool move, and he plays it.
Do you see the move or the issue with Wesley So not being able to
I
castle
did.
the Fisher random?
I saw the position and somebody talking about it. I didn't see what happened. Did he think he could castle and then he was told he couldn't?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Okay. Got
it
it.
was an interesting position. So Fisher random. We're gonna go on a bit of a tangent right now while
Sure.
we wait for Michael to clean this up. Fisher random, for anybody who's not familiar, is a game of chess where the pieces on the back row are scrambled. There's a couple rules, like the king has to be between the rooks and the bishops have to be on opposite colors, but other than that, it's just completely random. And castling, you know, it is really weird in that game, and we got to a position where the previous world champion for Fisher Random didn't know the rules for when he could castle, and the big thing was because his king wouldn't move when he actually went to castle, it ended up putting him in a position where he was in check but thought he could castle anyway, and he couldn't, and ended up getting checkmated and won because of it. It was wild.
Yeah, I think also I think I read that like Magnus also thought that he was allowed to castle.
Yeah.
So the
Turns
current
out,
the current normal world champion, like world classical champion,
yeah.
I guess soon to be not world champion anymore, but that's its own story. Also thought he was allowed to castles, but you can't. What was the reason why you can't? Because you weren't moving a king.
That's what they thought, and it is worth noting that by U.S. Chess Federation rules, you could castle in that position, and that's what
Okay.
chess.com uses as the ruling. But according
Okay.
to FIDE rules, you aren't allowed to do it, and so FIDE is the international body instead of the United States body. But it was a very odd position. Regardless, I would have expected you couldn't cancel just because you are in check, but
Right.
ultimately, the ruling is the ruling, and we come back into
Fascinating.
our game here, and Michael has simplified a lot of the position down, find themselves in a bit of an odd skewer, but, trading 2 rooks for the queen is totally acceptable, and now it's just a matter of time to actually close this one out, and Ireland is mostly just hoping for a couple of major blunders, as we see that there's mate and 7 on the board.
Yeah, indeed. Our computers finally agree um, on the number of moves until mate.
Oh,
Just bringing the rook in, I think this was very, very smart. He found the first move. It's down to mate and 6. Let's go. Does he see it? Probably not, but that's not really relevant. Probably just bring the rook up with check anyway now, I would suggest, or double the rooks on the 7th rank. Another very nice way to mate. Just put the rook on d7 and attack the king. Pretty much anything here wins for Michael. I would imagine even the worst move in the position does not destroy any real sort of advantage.
that's true. I do always enjoy puzzles of what is the worst move in the position. And
Rook b6.
Rook b6 would be pretty disastrous. But even then, you're still up so much material. And
That's
we
true.
can see that, this approach is not the fastest way to mate, but it's still mate in 7 instead of mate in 6. And I do like this. At least Ireland is showing some spirited defense. But
I would
with
just
so much
take.
material, you can sacrifice both these rooks.
Yep.
Like, take this and you're still fine, right? That's how crushing the position really is. The computer will probably ask to bring over, one of the knights, maybe even the bishop, to try and dislodge this one.
Doesn't matter. Just get rid of the bishop because once it's down to a pawn endgame, you pretty much can't lose. You can just clean up the pawns and go from there. Obviously, he's going to win this game. That's not really in question. You can just take that bishop. You can also just you could have taken on g7, but this is going to be mate in should be mate in 2, I think. Um, Rook takes on g7 and then knight to g6. I think is the follow up.
Yeah, that does appear to be it. After it takes, king forced here, and then knight can't come in. So I thought that fast for the knight, I was just like, wait, what's the follow-up? Because if you ladder mate him, then you just take the rook, but
Mm-hmm.
you do have more pieces.
Let's see if he sees it. Checkmate in 1 on the board. Only one way to do it. I mean, one way to do it immediately. Many,
Yeah,
many mates in 2. All right, he's going to go
this
for
works.
that. Yep. This works just fine.
Yeah.
Any move now from Ireland will result in one of the rooks moving up, and that will be mate on the board as game number 1 does go in favor of Michael of the High Point Virtual Academy of Michigan.
Good job, Michael. Yeah.
Indeed.
Sometimes it is a little bit frustrating to find some of these mates, but realistically, when you're up this much material and your opponent makes such a disastrous blunder early on, it does become difficult. The one thing that I do actually like seeing from both of our players, though, is how much time they actually
Yeah,
spent on the game, right? 6
absolutely.
minutes from both of them out of their starting 10 minutes. We're actually going to be talking a little bit about how to manage your clock a little bit better later on today. But for now, good stuff. Ultimately, just outside of that one blunder, I'm sure the computer will indict a couple of the other moves, but other
Of
than that,
course.
there's no major issues coming out from the side of either of our players. I thought that Ireland, outside of that one move, played about as well as he could have.
I agree. I mean, I think there were the little scrum on the queen side, where sure there could have been some more accurate play, but there always can be more accurate play, right? Like the computer is always going to judge, and so which piece you take with it is not. I guess it's not the main thing I would be concerned about right now, right? The mechanics were, excuse me, the mechanics were pretty good. The opening looked pretty strong. The time management was good. Like everything seemed like it was sort of flowing until, oops, we lost a queen, we lost a piece. But except for that, the game was played pretty well, and I think it's important to kind of realize there's a difference between hanging a queen on move 2 and then just collapsing, and playing a normal game with a couple of unfortunate blunders.
Yeah, that's definitely a spot, right? We talked about how to use puzzles, a couple weeks ago, Carl, and I think that's definitely a position where you kind of go back and you always ask the first thing that we always talk about is the first thing you look is what do checks give me and what is the best way to give a check, right? In that position, we were talking about, I was like, you need to take with the bishop so that you don't get chased away by their bishop. You can trade your bishop for their bishop, right? But, just taking with the wrong piece ends up being a bit of a disaster. Even with the knight coming forward and giving over the pawn fork,
Hmm.
after taking the pawn and the pawn taking, which is the natural looking move, it was still winning for black.
Yeah, right. Eventually, you get to a point where, even winning back a little bit of material, making a nice string of moves is just not enough to really bring you back into the game, right? Because you have lost too much material. If you're down 12 points, sure, you pick up a rook for free. We've seen this a couple of times. The eval bar is not impressed, right? It just doesn't even move because you're already so far ahead. And that can be one of sort of the sad parts of chess when you're that far behind. It can feel really, really hard to get back in the game.
Yeah. Now, I am a little bit curious, now that we are going to be on switching sides for our second game. Do you
Okay.
expect to be going to a third game this time?
I think there's a good chance. I think it looked like a relatively close opening, and then Michael got the better of the exchange on the
Yeah.
queen side. So I think there's a lot of chance for Ireland to win this game, right? Maybe the same thing will happen. Maybe it was, an unlucky opening for Ireland, and he's going to strike back, or maybe it was, just nice calculation on the other side, and it'll just be a clean 2-0. So I think there's a good chance this could be game three. I would say one of the best chances for a third game we've seen in a lot of the weeks that we've cast.
Yeah. I mean, that's oftentimes what happens when you have, relatively evil, or not evil, equal, equal skill levels between the two players. And something that's actually fascinating to me, right? We were doing a lot of looking into this before, but
Mhm.
Ireland is actually in the Legend division. He is at
Really?
the highest highest division you can get into.
Wow.
That means he's been playing a lot of chess, actually.
That's a lot of chess. You have to play a serious amount of chess if you want to end up in legend. I'm on the grind to get to legend. Um,
Yeah.
I have not succeeded in doing that, I would say. So, yeah, I think, oh, you can actually look. I didn't know you could do this. There are 513,000 players in Champion. I think you
Oh,
asked last week how many players there are in each one.
there you go.
And there are 126,835 players in Legend. And the top Legend player this week has 4,000 trophies.
So for context, what that means is they're not necessarily a particularly strong player, but they have played a lot of games, right? Every blitz or every bullet win gets you one of these trophies. Bullet or bullet gives
Bullet gives you
one,
three,
blitz
maybe
gives
three.
three. Yeah,
No, no,
and
no, no. Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
and then if you play rapid, every win there it gives you 10 trophies. So 4,000 trophies means at minimum they have won 400 games. And if you assume that they win about half of their games, right, they have played at
Right.
least 800 games of chess in the
Oh
past
no,
year.
they have 4,000 trophies. Did I say
Yeah.
400? Yeah. Okay.
Well, if you get 10 for every rapid win,
Oh, that's true.
absolute minimum.
Yeah,
That's a lot of
this
chess.
person plays a lot of. I don't really. This is too much of a tangent. I'm not even looking at our players anymore.
That's okay. We're
Um,
still waiting for them to get into their second game.
got it. Okay, that's a lot of trophies. Anyway, so if you want to get into Legend, you need to play a ton of games. Is the point? I'm stuck in the 1-2 below Legend, and it's not a great time.
Yeah.
Even that's pretty hard. So it's a tough. It's a tough road, I would say,
Yeah.
to get that far.
We also like to make a correction. We have been using the wrong pronouns for Ireland. Ireland actually uses she, her pronouns, and so going forward, we will make sure to rectify that. Make sure that all of our
Got it.
players feel comfortable coming onto the broadcast. But Ireland is going to be looking for an opportunity to come back in, this game, right? Yeah, because Michael won the
With the
first
white
one
pieces, I
with the
believe.
white pieces.
Yeah. So you have that first move advantage. I like playing with white. I think it's a more pronounced advantage in my mind at a high level.
Yeah.
I think
I,
it matters more if you're like 2200.
there
But go ahead.
It's just so much easier to decide, right?
Yeah.
Even if you have like this brilliant trap set up for if your opponent plays e4, if they play d4, suddenly it doesn't work
Right.
anymore, right? You just get to pick,
Yeah.
you get to pick what kind of game you're playing. We were very surprised actually. I believe it was in week 2, maybe week 3. One of our players actually opted to start with the black pieces, which is only something that you really see in Armageddon style games.
Ooh, that's true. I actually like Armageddon. If we need to have another tangent, um, essentially Armageddon is a tie-breaking format since chess. We might have to cut this story short. Maybe we'll
Oh,
explain Armageddon
we're
later. I
getting
think we're
in.
in the game, so we'll cut the Armageddon story short. But we do have a King's Fianchetto opening on the board from Ireland, as she is looking to start out game number 2 with some opening theory, perhaps.
Yeah. This is again a fairly disciplined style of opening as wow, going directly in. I love the confrontation coming into the middle, and I wonder if we're gonna get a queenless game.
Yeah, I think that could be on the board very quickly. This is the Hungarian opening, um, apparently, as f6 is played, essentially a bit of a gambit, just giving away the pawn. As I got very excited to open a database, so we're still in theory. Josh, there's been 17 games online on Lichess that have reached this position.
Seven. That's
Um,
actually very few, but
yeah,
I'm
and the
not
computer
particularly
gives plus
surprised.
4 at this point.
All right. Well, the engine that we see on chess.com, which is admittedly a little bit weaker than the one on Lichess, gives about plus 2.5.
Got it.
The big thing I would love to see from Ireland here is that is fine, right? Trading off of your opponent's light squared bishop is just getting an opportunity to, develop pieces and castle your king out of the center. As long as
Yep.
the big scary queen is on the board, the game is a little bit scary for the king.
Yes.
But the one thing that surprised me about this, right, is by putting all these pawns on dark squares, trading off your light squared bishop leaves your light squares rather weak going forward into the rest of the position.
That's true. I think I think I got crushed. I had very weak, essentially fianchetto squares like this around the castled king in one of our games last week, and I just got destroyed by you. It's amazing how little defense you can pose if you have one, essentially color combination of squares that is just completely undefended with that light square bishop gone. The infiltration ability is a lot stronger. On the other hand, there is no
Whoa.
light square bishop, at least for black. So I mean, there is that, but not a huge, probably not a huge issue in this game, but it is something to think about.
Yeah. Ireland has been gifted another piece and finds herself with a +3 advantage going into this game. With nothing developed yet, it's not the end of the world, and this queen is in a little bit of an odd position for now, but it is important to note, right? Some of the board vision from Michael has been, some of the board vision has not always been the best so far as we look at this.
Yeah, it is
I have
Michael
their
with
names
the black
backwards.
pieces. Yes.
Fortunately, yeah, darn. Okay, I was hoping we were getting game 3. I was so excited about that possibility.
You just couldn't. Yeah, unfortunately, it is Michael with the black pieces. So a little bit spun around, but that's okay. Michael now up a piece for a couple of pawns and just retreats the queen. I don't hate that move. I think that just kind of getting it out of harm's way, not the end of the world.
Now, if I'm Ireland, I lash out with the e-pawn here, just on the idea that if I
Sure.
get to trade this off, suddenly we can get a royal skewer,
True.
right? Pick up the queen on the backside. That will trade the queens off, and after that, if your opponent doesn't castle, Ireland will be able to pick up a fork here and hopefully pick up a rook and recover some of the lost
Yep.
material.
I think you do trade though if you are Michael. Probably takes and castle would be what I would play here with the black pieces, instead
Oh,
moving the queen back, deciding to keep that attacking piece on the board. I don't hate this idea. You are up the material, maybe going to try to go for some sort of mating attack. We'll have to wait and see, but I think this is at least some thought went into that decision.
yeah. Now the king still in the middle of the board is a little bit spooky for Michael in this position, right? Ireland will need to try and mount an attack as Pewter not a fan of
Oh,
this move.
yeah, not at all takes,
Yeah,
as we might be going to game 3 anyway, Josh. In the corner, as that is a fork and all sorts of trouble suddenly in the black position. Remember that advantage, it was a very high number, but it was still only one piece.
yeah.
And this is now going to be a piece advantage for the player with the white pieces, Ireland here, as she is going to be in a material advantage here very shortly.
Yeah. Picking up the rook, picking up the knight will recover it in exchange for just a single pawn. And remember, Michael is still multiple moves away from castling, right? The
Yeah.
bishop and the knight are in the way. By moving our pieces a little bit too quickly, we end up finding ourselves in a spot where the queen going back leaves this knight out and also makes it a little bit harder to bring this rook into the center of the
Yep.
board where it prefers to be.
Absolutely. Knight taken from the board. Now just a clean 2 pawn advantage. Also a better pawn structure. 2 pawn islands against 3 pawn islands. I don't know if you can highlight those for us. Essentially just the groupings of the pawns. So there's the one island of two, one or 2 islands of two, and 1 island of 1 for Michael, whereas there's an island of 4 and an island of 3 for Ireland. So essentially 2 versus 3 little isolated pawn groups or pawn islands can sometimes make all the difference just because they are able to help coordinate themselves a little bit better um, in the especially the end
Oh,
stage of the game.
and now suddenly the king's going for a walk, right?
Indeed.
Great for dogs, not for chess. This is
Usually not.
definitely a rough spot that will trade off a bishop and open up the d file, which is totally okay when you have this queen just or king just out in the open. And now the big question is, how do you effectively hunt this down?
I think knight f6 is probably the best try here, just to attack the queen, defend the d7 square a little bit more, sort of give some shelter to the king, and let you bring the rooks into the game. Instead, stepping the queen forward, that does allow a little bit more pressure to get to the king. Kings things like queen
Yeah.
d5 check followed by the rook fork could be very, very strong.
Yeah, my I think this might actually be our strongest try as well. The computer does not like this, and I guarantee there's a tactic here which will pick up the king
Yep.
or queen for Ireland.
Maybe the king too at some point.
Yeah, probably. We can see this does allow the knight to come out and block the check, which will
Yep.
leave the rook in a rough position. But oh, mate in 6 suddenly bringing and allowing these pieces to coordinate. Fortunately, king
Yep.
can take the rook here.
Indeed. Or can step back. We'll see what Michael finds. He does
Yeah.
take the rook, but the queen will fall. And inevitably get traded back and still mate in 8 in the position.
Wow. What a turnaround here.
Yeah, absolutely. Very similar in a way, though, I think, to last game.
Yeah.
In that, sort of a normal looking opening and then a couple of blunders in the middle of the position and then just completely falling apart. And the counter blunder in this game, winning for both sides at one point.
I really would like to see Ireland pick up this rook in the corner, right? Even though there are mates in 4 in the position, it's just so much easier to win when you don't have to do that.
And it's never too late to get back rank mated or
Yeah.
something, right? Have some, you do have the G3 pawn push, so there is that, but it's never too late to just blunder something and then
Yeah.
feel very foolish later.
All right. Even though the
I like
computer
that.
says it's only plus 67, right? It freezes the back rank. In theory, this is, a knight that can't move because it does mean that this rook gets picked up. And, well, it will be a trade of rooks. When you have a queen and a bunch of pawns and your opponent doesn't have a queen or mini pawns at all, it becomes much more difficult as the king moves forward. You need to be careful with this rook. That's really the only danger in the position.
Yep, just move the rook away. I think this should be a pretty simple conversion for Ireland. I'm noticing the players have used less time in this game than they had in the previous one. Just a interesting side note. The checks start to come through. You can block that with the rook if you'd like, but the king will step up instead, and that is mate in 3 in the position here, Josh.
Pretty sure after this, only legal move here, here, and there should be the end of the game, as the computer says. But, wow, just these small tactical scuffles are showing a lot. And this is one of the big reasons why a lot of chess players recommend not moving too many pieces early on in the position, is just because you find yourselves in these awkward positions. And if you are a tactical genius, you will always come out ahead, but it's way easier when you don't have to be a
genius. That is very wise, Josh, and very, very true. Mate in 9 now in the position. I'm surprised it takes that many moves, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
But I guess it does. You just queen e7. I'm surprised it takes that long, but I guess I will believe the computer. I think the king can run to f7 and g6 if you take the rook, maybe. Is the idea here.
That's actually the most resilient move. That's wild.
Yeah, it's actually the only really legal thing you can do now. I guess you can block the knight if you'd like to. Yeah, the king can run out, and the knight defends pretty well. Knights defend against the queen incredibly well. This is actually sort of an instructive moment at the very end of this game. The knight just blocks all of the checks here by the queen.
Yeah, very impressive.
Um,
So, well, I mean, the easy thing to do, right? You have 3 passed pawns over here that you can always bring in. The one thing that makes this oh,
that's a
very good
fork.
idea. Doesn't
You
work
can
though.
pin it, yeah, or you can just do that. That also works. Mate in one. On the board, queen e8 should be mate. See if she's able to find it. No, but it
It's
will be
okay.
mate very, very shortly.
Yeah. No matter what move that is
Yep.
made, rook to e8 will be checkmate, and Ireland will be bouncing back and taking us to a game
Yeah.
3.
Let's go. We haven't had a game 3 in a long time, I think.
We have not.
So I'm excited. I think we haven't been here too much, but it's great to see these players, really going back and forth and getting to that final game.
Yeah.
That we wanted to see.
I've been impressed so far with, the time management of these players. I've also been impressed with the fact that they're playing much more principled openings than we've tended to see throughout the
Yep.
course of the weeks of the Stride Esports League Chess Tuesdays, and it does mean that, our games have mostly been decided by individual blunders in the mid game, just looking for potential ways to move pieces with more attacking chances, but not necessarily thinking about how your opponent can attack you back after you make these moves. And that's one of the big things that I would love to see in our third game, is just maybe a bit more cautious game from both players in order to make sure that you can get towards the later stages of the game and you're not stuck in a position where, oh, well, one of us is playing without 2 pieces.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, they have used their time well, these players, but I think, taking just a couple of extra seconds too to sort of check which of your pieces are under attack. When we talked about this, you just mentioned, and last week as well, it can be really hard to see what your opponent is going to do. Because that can be very, very hard to calculate your own moves as well as your opponent's. Takes a little bit of extra time, but they do have a little bit of time to do that. And I think that would also be great to see, just as part of that third game. Be a little more cautious, slow down a little bit, make sure you're not hanging your queen.
And Michael has e4 on the board. So as we start jumping onto the
Got it.
64 squares, Alehin's defense comes
Woo!
through.
Sorry, got all excited. That's one of my favorite names.
Yeah,
Maybe not my favorite opening. I've never played it. I don't really like playing against it because I think it's weird. But
it is weird. I mean,
but
it
it's on the board.
usually revolves with e5, after knight comes out, e5, and then this knight jumps around a bunch, but a Scandinavian variation of Alehin's defense. I must admit, I know nothing about this position.
I also know almost nothing. I guess we can boot up the database.
This feels like the kind of opening that grandmasters would play, and nobody below that level has any idea how the position is supposed
That's
to be
actually
played.
true. That seems accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are on knight f3. All right. I've got the position at the database.
Nice.
This is played at the Masters database 8 times.
Okay.
Pawn takes is the most common move. Knight takes back. We are still in theory. This has a 1 win for it's +1 equals 2.
Ooh.
As far as now, this is a new game.
Interesting.
There's 3 games online still.
Yeah.
At this point, and now we are on the last one of them. In that game, knight h6 was played.
Knight h6.
They did not win with black.
I feel like I just accept that I have moved my knight too many times and put it back on f6 here, and pick it back up with the queen. But this is one of the dangers, like moving your pieces too many times early on, right? This knight a little bit offside. Your opponent already has 2 defended knights out in the position. You can sack here, but why? And that will trade back. The danger level's coming through.
F5 moves the knight instead of taking the knight, but the knight's still hanging. We'll have to go back. This will be the 3rd knight move in 7 moves of this game so far.
Yeah. A lot of knight moves going all over the place, right?
Goes right back, and suddenly, I don't want to interject too much, but we are back in theory. We've transposed back into theory. There are now 14 games, actually, in the database.
Probably with fewer moves played is kind of the expectation that I have, right? We've gone back to a position where it's like, we could have gotten here in 6 moves or 4 moves, but now this is kind of what I was expecting in the first place, right? Pinning this knight to the queen as a way to get pieces out,
Yep.
queen out, bishop out in order to try and get them onto the board. And right now, we do in fact see Ireland looking to castle her king out of safe or
Hmm.
king into safety.
Yeah. Hopefully into safety. Hopefully not out of safety. But also interesting motif with the F pawn sort of advance that far up the board. It does let the rook be a little bit more active in the game. Um, at times, playing H4 here to try to solidify the bishop. 2 games left in this position in the database. But if you were to castle right now with the black pieces, that rook would be defending the knight as well, and maybe looking towards white's F2 pawn later in the future. That seems
Oh,
redundant. But the knight instead jumping in as we now are back to a completely new game.
yeah. Fascinating idea, right? We've been seeing this a fair amount from both Ireland and Michael, right? Moving these knights aggressively, but I'll be entirely honest, I'm not sure what putting the knight here will do, right? Obviously, you're trying to pick up this pawn, but if bishop takes, then we're back to a position of neutrality, and the computer says this position is dead drawn. This does not pick up the pawn, as it is defended here.
Indeed. Your computer not super impressed. Caddy. Maybe?
Caddy's back.
Caddy's back. All right. Well, we will keep talking about the game, and hopefully this will get brought back to you guys shortly. As B7 is played, a little bit of play on the queen side of the board.
If I was black, I would be very scared of trying to castle kingside all of a sudden. And I do like the fianchetto of this bishop, right? And just to be clear, fianchettos, whenever you see this kind of structure in bishop living in the middle of the house, those are fianchettos, right? The main idea being that you have a strong control of this long diagonal and then can get to a lot of different diagonal spots. That is not a move that I had on my radar.
That was I completely concur with you on that. The little bit of a rook lift, getting the rook into the game. Not a very typical idea, but it does not immediately lose itself. The black or the dark square bishop is off the board. A kind of common motif is blundering a rook to the bishop on f8 if it was in the starting position here, but it is not. So the rook able to develop itself. Not the greatest move in the mind of the computer, just because it is a little bit on the side of the board. But hey, it's in the game, and that's all you want.
Yeah. It's definitely one of the motifs of new young players in particular, right? Like, well, if my rook is the strongest piece, let's get it out quickly, right?
Yep.
So you oftentimes see this come through. Eventually, you kind of see it come back at the grandmaster level every now and then. But, this position has so much life in it still. And the computer says it is, minus 0.5, which means that, black has winning chances, but definitely hasn't won yet. The big thing is let's make sure we get the rest of our pieces into the position, get this king out of the center. That's kind of my biggest concern as a player right now is what do I do if my opponent just starts launching pawns at me? And the answer is probably just chill, but always a little spooky.
Yeah, absolutely. Bishop being developed. I think this is probably the most sound game that we've seen so far. We sort of talked about the players being a little bit more cautious, and I think they certainly are.
Yeah. Big props. Computer does not like that, but I'm not seeing the refutation immediately as the queen becomes more aggressive. And as the pawn jumps forward, I'm expecting the queen will probably have to kind of go back. And again, let's get the knight, let's get the rooks into the game. As long as you're playing with you're effectively playing with fewer pieces right now, as long as the knight hasn't moved.
Absolutely. I'm not exactly sure what's going on stream. Just not totally sure what you all can see, but hopefully this can get pulled back up within relatively short order. But so far, a pretty balanced position still to this point. I'm being told you can see everything, which you, I guess, already knew because you could see it. So
good job.
I'm going to be quiet. And thanks to everybody running the production. And I'm going to just stick to talking about chess, I guess.
Yeah, Chess Tuesdays. That's us.
Absolutely. A little shuffling going on. We're seeing some high-level little shuffles around.
So what are your major ideas in this position, Carl, if you were playing as black?
If I was playing with the black pieces,
Yeah.
As the knight jumps
We'll
in.
get
I would
the
probably
queen out of the way first. That's step one, I think.
yeah, I'm gonna get the queen out of the way, and I'm gonna try to bring. I mean, really not super complicated plan. I'm gonna move the queen. I'm gonna move the knight into the game, and I'm gonna castle. I'm sort of thinking about castling kingside. I was gonna momentarily think about queenside, but you're sort of being attacked. So I think I just castle the king on the king side. I let the sort of broken structure for white serve me well, since the white side can't really attack with the pawns on the king side, just because the G pawns are doubled. And I'm gonna try to just make advantage to blah, 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 words. Take advantage of the pin. The knight on f3 is pinned, so white's not really going to attack me on the king side right now. Put the king over there, development pieces, and maybe look to break through in the center.
Oh, Peter, not a fan of that one. What's the there is 100% a tactic here.
The fork. You can play rook c3 and fork on c7.
Oh, there you go. And that will be unreturned, as this does have to move out of the way. You cannot take it back once
It's
the
actually
knight
the best
takes.
move to take.
To take the knight.
No, to take the rook.
Oh, that's wild.
Is apparently the best move.
I don't think any human ever plays that.
Oh, I don't think so either. I think you just move the queen. But
yeah, that's one of the things where the computer's sitting there. It's like, you know, it's +8, and you're just like, well, what if I play more human move? And the computer's like +10.
Right. Yeah, the computer is rarely impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, the computer's always never impressed with human moves. But deep in thought, and I definitely do not blame her right now, Ireland, for being in the think tank. This is a confusing position as the queen just steps back, like you called out. Very human move. I assume knight takes is the most human move here. Rook takes is actually the best move. Again, but maybe I'm turning into a computer. So the knight will take. It's still +8. That's good enough.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Taking the rook was not the best move. Now, the one thing that is worth noting is bringing in the rook anyway is probably still on the cards, as you do end up getting the knight back with the bishop. But now we finally see, right, the king cannot move, or cannot castle out of danger, and we're very rapidly approaching a spot where, with a +6 advantage, as this queen eventually finds a safe place to sit, I actually wonder, I was going to look at taking this knight before I realized it was all double protected by the rook, but this queen is going to be in a very awkward position for a little while, as we see Ireland jumping forward with it instead.
Yeah, moving it forward, you got to be really, really careful.
Whoa.
As that is a
Knight
blunder alert. Computer, it's just, the computer's always so upset.
What a scumbag.
Yeah,
Knight
I think
takes.
that, yeah, and then pawn takes, and then you can take the knight. Yeah, you can take the knight, and that is a fork. Although you probably just trade queens, and then you attack the rook at the end, and you're just in a better position.
Yeah. Wow, what a tackle shot. That's one of those spots where Michael that made that move very quickly, right?
Yeah, just a couple of seconds spent. Over. Yeah.
That'll also work.
It also works. Apparently that was the best move. All right. What do I know?
Yeah, thanks, computer.
Always. Now, now you can take the knight with the bishop, and you actually get the value of the fork. That's why. As opposed to just trading queens, and you can move the rook. So here you actually get the fork, and if you block with the bishop, doesn't really matter. But if you were to block the bishop, then you could just still take. The bishop would be pinned and could not take back, and be threatening the king.
Yeah. So as this comes through, this has to be the idea.
Yep.
Now, all of the squares close to the king are kind of being covered by the bishop and the queen.
Oh, no!
Tragedy. Absolute tragedy.
Oh, no. Tragedy strikes for Ireland.
The rook. Oh, no, because now the other rook falls off the board.
It's a fork. On f7, Michael...
Oh, they don't realize it.
Doesn't find it, but attacks the bishop instead. Bishop moves back. The fork is still in the position. You can also just take this and then fork. That seems clearly superior.
I'm kind of in shock.
Takes the bishop,
I'm just kind of in shock. The position was so good. Ireland was playing so many of the best moves. Now I wonder, okay, at least they recognize...
the fork's still there.
Oh, no, the fork's still there in a different square.
Wow, wow, wow.
Okay.
Brilliant start to the game by Ireland. I mean, playing best move after best move, I think. Completely devastating the attack. Just needed to play bishop takes and complete the fork of the rook and the queen. I think it would have been almost resigns. I mean, lights out
Yeah.
for
That
Michael, but
position was tough.
instead it's lights out almost the other way around. You could just play d5 here, I think. Brings the queen up
Now it is
instead.
still
That also
protected by the
works.
knight. And
Yep,
now the knight is protected, but this can kick it out, and you can still pick up the bishop.
absolutely.
Actually, I'm curious. I wonder what happens after this.
Ooh, mate
But
in 8, the computer already gives.
oh.
Okay. I spend too much time around computers. I would probably play d5 here,
D5.
pretty much
That
immediately.
makes sense. Yeah. Yep.
And then I would
Lock
move
in
the
the
knight
bishop.
and then attack. But what do I know?
It's okay. Okay. Now we are kind of threatening this, but again, it is protected by the queen here. Do you want to be... I would say there are some ways to be really fancy about it. Unfortunately, now this Rick just needs to get out of dodge
Yep.
at this point.
Just get out of the way. Don't try to be fancy. That works.
I
Probably
mean,
still d5.
either of these moves, I think, will be
Yeah.
sufficient to defend. Yeah.
There's d5. Just trapping in the black king and the black pieces, honestly. Just they have very, very few squares to go to.
Suddenly, again, this game was so good for so much of it,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
not...
It can all fall apart so fast.
Yeah. Okay, now if this knight moves, there is a royal fork in the position, which
Yeah.
would bring us back to relative equality and probably actually make black better.
Yeah, surely. It has to be. But instead, the queen moves. Very smart decision. Attacking the rook. I don't care what the bar says. You're out of the way of the fork. And that is... I mean, you want to minimize when you're in this kind of position where you're totally winning.
Oh,
You want to minimize the chances you have to just throw that lead away.
yeah.
And this is exactly what we're talking about with that idea. This rook can be taken by the bishop. Instead, the knight
Wow.
checks. Okay,
Very professional move.
indeed.
Not the one I was expecting, but
Likewise,
very, very tough
knight
position.
f8
Kind of
works here.
knight f8 throws in the check.
Then you
And
can
it,
pick up the rook.
yeah, and all of these squares, the king could not get closer because of the bishop and the queen.
Yep.
And then you would be able to pick it up, and it is found by
Finds
Michael.
it. Very well played by Michael. Checking the black king. Not too many squares to go to. Steps up. Just take the rook.
Take the rook anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say absolutely. I mean, I'm almost tempted to play queen c4 and just trade off the knight too, but that
Queen
might be a little bit
c4.
too close to comfort.
That that is very fancy. Then you would have to convert that endgame.
Yeah, that might be too hard. Watch the royal fork. You just got to be careful, right? There's nothing immediate here, but that is the only way to lose this game.
Yeah.
Is if you lose the queen without trading the knight.
One rule of thumb I always like to see in these positions, when your opponent has a knight, make sure that your most valuable squares are always on different colors, right?
Yeah,
As
that's a great
long as
point.
these are on the same color, they can both be hit by the knight at the same time. It isn't likely to matter, but it is the one way that you can sometimes find yourself in trouble.
Yep, absolutely. That's how you lose. Many checks right now. Also, 1 minute and 30 seconds on the clock for Ireland, so not that much time. Almost mate. But are we going to head toward a threefold
great move?
repetition? You've got to be careful. Evidently not, because the computer would say it is. Just move a pawn if you're worried about that kind of thing in this kind of position. Just push a pawn. It resets that. As this is a lot of checks, just for not a lot of real estate, as I'm very concerned that we are going to head ourselves to a game 4.
Yeah, remember, in our format, draws do not count as a win for either side. Do need to avoid
Just
the
push a
three-fold
pawn. Just push a pawn. That's like the #1 way to reset that, because pawns don't go backward. But we're very... I mean, this is 2 times in a lot of these positions. As that is a draw by repetition, as I don't know what to say, Josh, about what we just watched.
A shocking shock. We've never had a game 4, I don't think.
No.
At least I haven't seen a game 4 come through.
Never. I don't think so.
Wow. Well, Ireland resolutely defending, refusing to resign, does end up earning herself a 4th game.
Yeah.
And honestly a little bit wild. Definitely feel as though Michael had the time and the material to convert that position into a win, but now we're going to be
Yep.
going into another game. And again, all three of our games have been mostly determined by a single blunder in the mid game, right? But this is some of the highest quality chess I think we've seen on the Stride Esports League channel thus
Yep.
far. Both players consistently making good moves, keeping themselves in. It's usually just one or two mistakes that have been really determining the game, and that's oftentimes what happens at this level of play. I definitely feel as though both these players are outperforming their rating.
Yeah, absolutely. On that point, these players are playing far and away higher than the rating. I would say probably around 4 digits, 1,000, 1,100 maybe.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but I think neither of them have played a ton recently because
Right.
Ireland is legend. We talked about that, but she has not played a ton in the last like couple of months. I think.
Yeah.
I could be incorrect about that. I'm going through their history here.
Yeah.
So they
And
got legend, and then you don't decay
well,
out of
gotta
that. There's
cut you
nothing like
off.
it.
We
Oh,
are in fact on the board again,
thank
and
you.
Ireland starts off with Van Cruise transposing into an England Gambit decline.
Wow.
Reversed French. Obviously knew that off the top of my head. Definitely wasn't reading it off the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Definitely not reading it. I would have known that too. I mean, really, anyone would know. I think it's
Everybody
so
would know
it's
this position.
yeah, yeah, it's so popular. As the
Yeah.
engine already upset. I just can't get over how upset the engine gets. I need to stop talking about it so much, but you can just take on B7.
Yeah.
Um,
Free pawn.
yeah.
I think this queen's gonna get chased around for a little bit. We have seen this as a motif in a couple of our games thus far, right? Both players have been very excited about pushing the queen to attack different things on the board, but getting the queen out early gets yourself in a lot of trouble, as I still think it's taking the pawn.
Yeah, it's got well. Now that the queen is gone, you actually win the rook too.
Yeah.
I think is the point. And found, as Ireland is saying, I am not going to make a mistake this time. I am coming for the jugular. Michael in a ton of trouble straight away in this game.
Yeah. Sometimes moving those queens around early will work when your opponent isn't prepared for it. And now it is worth noting that if you move the knight here, it will lose the knight as well. You take this with check and can still pick up the rook. There's also not a lot of reason to move this knight as it is protected here.
Yep.
Obviously there's no way to really defend it, so just gotta say goodbye to one of your towers
Ooh,
as, oh no, another piece in theory falls off, and if you take the rook first, it doesn't work because king can go here, which
also
would defend
block
the knight.
with the knight. Yeah.
True.
Good. Very, very smart, I think, by Ireland. Take a couple of extra seconds to figure out which piece to take. I think there's a lot of people that would have just snapped taken the rook. That's very, very smart
Yeah.
to use that time. And it's just she took 13 seconds on that move, so it's
Yeah.
not about a lot of time, right? It's just about can I take the knight? I take the knight. Okay, it's check. Oh, then I can take the rook. Ooh, great. Done.
Great.
That's how that calculation looks. Now the king has to step up, or you can trade queens as well. If the queen drops back, immediately take it. Just
Yes,
trade
still
those
take
queens off the board.
You're up so
Yeah,
much
don't
material.
don't think
Take
about
it.
this one. Just take it. And I think this
Okay.
is actually how Ireland got in trouble last game. Is kind of keeping these pieces on the board a
Yeah.
little bit too long.
Ooh, okay. Now the position is still plus 13, right? I guarantee the computer's like, yeah, you're up so much material, whatever, right? The queens cancel each other out. Now, next step, you need to get the rest of your pieces out, but you're in such a dominating position. As long as you don't come under attack and don't hang
Yep.
your queen back, you're gonna be okay.
Absolutely. Deep in thought. A lot of good moves here, right? I mean, basically you want to move one of your other pieces.
Yeah.
At this point.
That works.
That totally works. Not exactly sure what the plan is. But it moves the piece out, and that is totally fine.
Yeah. Honestly, good stuff coming in from
Yeah.
Ireland, right? The most impressive move for me was, again, taking the knight on c6. Getting the little bit of extra pieces, a little bit of extra material in the position. And now we gotta see. This has been a little bit of a foible for both of our players in not getting their pieces out. You can see that, the back row is still pretty full, and the king side here, multiple moves away from castling for Michael.
Still a few moves away. queen being brought out, but again, not moving yourself any closer to castling, right? It is an
Yeah.
attack, sort of, on the white king, but more pieces will continue to fall as, there's threat of a mating attack starting to come in
Yeah.
on the black king.
No, I would on my next move, provided it's still there, is instantly just move queen here and trade them off, right? We talked about it before. You have so much material. You have 2 connected pass pawns on the other
Yep.
side of the board that you can just launch at your opponent and say, what are you going to do about this? You have to stop it, and eventually you will have to trade off one of your pieces in order to stop the
Yep.
pawns.
Yeah, absolutely. Also threatening um, queen e5 just to take another pawn. Maybe that helps black develop a little bit, but the bishop can't come
Yeah.
out. Maybe the knight comes out. But a lot of options here for white. Just be careful you don't blunder the bishop. You could even play bishop c8.
Bishop c8 is a very funny move.
I would play it.
I'm putting my bishop where your bishop started.
Basically.
All
Takes
right.
with check. I like this decision. I think this is smart.
Now, the person who taught me chess in elementary would oftentimes call this the turkey strategy, because you're gobbling all over the place.
Sure. Bishop b5 check, I think, here. Just keep checking the king. Wait for some sort of mistake.
It is hard to find a checkmate with only 2 pieces.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually a good point. I think so. It's been useful thus far to sort of gobble up the pawns, but now, I mean, even a2, a4, just shove the pawn. How do you stop that pawn? I don't think you do, because I think you're running out of progress to make here. The king only has one legal move, and it's to go right back.
Evidently, the position has improved though, but
You have queen
as long as this exists, I will be a little bit worried for Ireland, because what we've been seeing is that the board vision has generally been.
Yeah, you're starting to pick up more pieces though, which is
Yeah.
always useful. There's also e4, which wins the rook.
True.
Maybe the queen can actually just take it. So just kidding. Maybe that's a great way to lose.
Take the bishop with check.
Just take the bishop. Yep. Continue gobbling.
Gobble.
With check, and the king's going to end up on c7, which is not a great place for the king.
With Halloween done, next major holiday is American Thanksgiving.
True.
Sorry, Canadians. But now you can definitely be, the turkey. Just gobble up all these pieces. And once your opponent runs out of pieces, it's very hard to go for an attack. So, again, the only thing I'm worried about is just this lurking in the position.
Yeah.
Right? It is not enough to win on its own, but we have seen Ireland make a couple of mistakes before, and I like the fact, again, taking their time, spending 40 seconds
very precise
taking that bishop.
Yeah. It's a very strong game. I mean, you can there's a lot of things that are good here. You can take the knight, you can take the pawn, you can check again.
Yeah.
It's
now, let's be clear, we do mean this pawn, not this pawn. If you were to take a pawn.
I don't hate the check. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe going the wrong way. You're pretty close to being able to mate with just the bishop and the queen.
Yeah.
Queen c6.
None of the pieces can help.
Yeah, right. I would play queen c6 followed by bishop a6. And just, one little misstep and you can lose the game immediately.
Yeah.
You only have 2 choices right now, and I think king b8 loses on the spot to bishop a6. Apparently not, but you have to be careful. I don't actually know how you defend this. Oh, bring the queen back, maybe?
Got to bring one of these pieces back. I think you got to bring the bishop back.
You just take it, though.
Oh, that's
white's
true.
Move. I think you have to play queen e7.
Ah. Yeah, that'll do it.
I think that's the only move that stops.
Only way to continue the game.
Yeah, queen c8 is not mate, and that is mate in 1 on the board. If she finds it, I don't want to speak too soon, it is the reverse sweep from 1-0 down to 2-1 up. Ireland comes back, survives game number 3, and wins the match.
Great stuff coming in from Ireland, right? A game 4, forcing a draw by repetition in game 3 in order to get another game on the board. Honestly, great stuff. I am so happy that we get to see yet another strong performance from all of our players. And it's not as though this game was determined by some crazy tactical sequence. It was mostly just a single blunder coming out from the side of Michael that Ireland was able to
Mhm.
pounce on. But because we're already past the hour, we're going to going from the eastern region directly to the central region. You don't
Yeah.
have to watch us play chess anymore.
Yeah, huge benefit this week. We have to watch them play chess, not us play chess. You don't have to listen to us ramble. Um,
Well, you do kind of.
you have to listen to us ramble for a little bit, but at least not for like 45 minutes, which I imagine is painful. So we will be hopping over to the central region now. It's going to be the Louisiana Virtual Treasure Academy, represented by Ariana, who we saw, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, and the Texas Virtual Academy at Hallsville, represented by Patrick, I believe. So they will be getting on into game shortly. They have been told that we're ready for them, so hopefully we will see them on the
Yeah.
chessboard very soon.
Now, I definitely have seen Ariana play before. I don't believe I've seen Patrick play in
Okay.
the past. That's right, because we were trying to find their game, but their name on chess.com did not match the one that we had in our database, so we couldn't find them. But as we are
Got it.
jumping into the game, we do again have Patrick, CFox52, playing as the white pieces against Ariana,
Ooh, the
Enemy
Reti opening.
2006. Now, computers are a big fan of the Ready.
That's true. Yeah, but we've discussed computers enough. I don't care.
Don't care. Yeah.
This is a very, very typical opening. This is real stuff that we are playing right now.
What?
Wow.
Santa Sierra's Folly.
This is the
That
Zuckertor opening. Also, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There has to be a story behind that name,
This
but
is
I
a
don't know
this
what
is
it
a
is.
novelty. This is a brand new game in the Masters database already on Move 2. This has never
Honestly,
been
kind of
played.
impressive for a game.
It's a draw too. It's 0-0.
Yeah, for a game that's a draw, a little bit surprising, but I guess like there's not a lot of people who would even consider B4 as a
Right.
move early on.
Right.
But I am going to look
That's
up
true.
after we are done, maybe during the break, what Santa Sierra's Folly is, because like that is a name for an opening.
Who's Santa Sierra? That's what I want to know.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's
yeah.
mysterious.
Now, one of the things that's
A chess
interesting to
player,
me,
an old chess
right?
player. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting to me right now is, all the pawns are kind of moving on to, the fourth rank here, and it is creating a situation where you have a lot of pawns on the black squares, and as the bishop also comes out, the dark square complex is becoming very strong, but it's very isolated, right? None of these pawns on the